Alright, so I'm in the midst of developing an app for HighLevel that will basically transcribe a phone call and then generate a task from that call. So what it'll output is a date and time, and then we can go task, we can add a task, and then for the title, we would put generate task from call, we would put task title here, we would go generate task from call, task description, and then do in, we would use a dynamic field, and we would put the due at date. And so this would become a string just like this, and that would feed in, and that would create a task a few days in the future. So if you're talking with a prospect and they say, you know what, why don't you give me a call next week when I'm more free, or next month, or whatever, instead of having to go in and manually write that task, because frankly I would forget doing that a lot, you just leave it, and this transcribes the call, and then it adds this task for you. So it would add a task for next week or whatever. And we're just going to assign to, I guess, myself. And so, this is the general idea. You would basically, we have the transcript getting generated here, so we put in the recording URL. This is just a URL for testing, and then we would pass it to the task, and that would generate the data that we need. But it's not so simple, because this is the process that we're running. So what we have is, first we're trying to figure out who the primary user is, right? Because if it's the business owner who we think should follow up, then we want to create a task. But if the prospect, this is only going to apply to the business owner, the person who's actually using the CRM. And so we want the task to apply to them. So we're trying to figure out who the primary user is. And in this case, it thinks that the primary user is Rohan, is this guy that I was talking to about this app. And that's, in fact, not the case. I'm the primary user. And so that could use some fine-tuning. But then what we're doing is we're evaluating the call transcript to try to figure out if we want to create a task. Okay, so what we're doing is we feed in the whole transcript to this, and we try to see what this thinks. And this says that basically, because of the frustration, there's a case to follow up. And that is in fact true. I wanted to follow up with Rohan to let him know when a solution became developed, when a solution was ready. And yeah, so if you were talking with a prospect and you're like, look, you know what, I can just follow up with you when we offer this service, then you would create a task maybe for a month or a week out, but you don't actually know how long, just from the transcript, how long it would take. Unless I said on the call, it's going to take me about a month to do this, then we could create a task about a month out. But in this case, we don't really know how far out to create a task. Maybe we could try editing this. Okay, so right at the end of the call, this is a 30-minute call, so this is a really long transcript. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in, I'll reach out to you in about a week. I think that this solution should be ready by then. Okay? And so now let's see how this does. So we should see that it wants to generate a task if it's, if I say that I should have a task ready in about a week. Now, if the prospect said that, then we wouldn't want to create a task, which is why we're trying to determine which is primary. But let's see what it says. So for primary user, it still thinks Rohan is the primary user. And then in terms of analysis, it is clear that a potential task needs to be added. The conversation indicates that Speaker 0 and Speaker 1 discuss the development of a new app that could potentially solve some issues faced by Speaker 1. So you can have way more control. Yes, okay, here it is. So it found it. So indicated that they would reach out to Speaker 1 about a week later with the solution. And now we have this other action which goes below that, which is actually trying to come up with a counter to the first analysis, because this is kind of like a chain of thought operation where we're using 4.0 mini, so it's extremely cheap, but we're prompting it a bunch of times, because if you think about it, LLMs are kind of genius because they're not that smart in that they just predict the next word, but when you have a lot of writing, essentially writing is thinking, and so if you can put together a well-defined argument, then you have thought, essentially, without really thinking. And so, let's see the counter to that. I believe the analysis suggesting a follow-up task is warranted. Oh, is warranted. Overlooks a critical detail. Speaker Zero did not mention the intent to reach out a week later. It was framed more of a tentative time frame than a definitive commitment. They do not need. Okay. So, anyways, it's just arguing about it. And now it decided false. It should not create a task. But I think in this case, we would actually want a task if I had said I would reach out. So let's fine tune this. Okay, so I just changed this up. So typically when you create a task, it's going to be, something like follow up with me next week or next month or next year. And so we're putting that specifically in the prompt to warrant a task. And so hopefully this isn't really, overtraining or overfitting our prompting, because this has to work for a wide variety of scenarios. But let's see what it says now. So primary user, it's gonna say Rohan. Again, I don't know. I don't actually know how much that matters if it does need to know exactly the user. Follow up. Yes, so it should hopefully say it's going to. However, I believe that the post task overlooks some important details. I think the main thing here is that the counter kind of seems to overweight or have stronger effects on the result than the transcript analysis, because it's not as much of an argument as this one is. But I would rather not create a task than to create one that's irrelevant. Or maybe it should be the other way around. Okay, so let's see what it says. Should create task false. Interesting. All right, let's try this. So, if you think there should be a task, propose how long in the future it should be, i.e., next week, tomorrow, so okay, let's try this. I mean, at this point, like, we're just fucking with shit. We're just like changing little wording here, trying to dial in the responses, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is not going to be 100% reliable. Some calls are really hard to determine what's going on without more context. It's really hard to know, if a task needs to be created and if there's already one being created. And so they're determined, definitely don't create a task with a confidence of 5. However, it overlooks a crucial logistical detail. They will reach out in about a week. This means that there's already a clear action plan in place. All right. Yeah, I mean, that's why this is really hard, So I was working on this feature for the app. I think it's going to have to be kind of postponed, because it's very hard to get this to be reliable, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of prompting that goes into this, and it's gonna take some serious training to dial that in. And I don't know if it's really that useful, I don't know. Potentially an automated follow-up would be better, or some more conversational context, something like that. So this is gonna have to be something that we revisit, but yeah,